That's cool.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome on this beautiful November 13th. Club meeting is officially underway. This is quite a day, November 13th. 5 Rotarians have birthdays, so shout out to Holly Turner, John Bush, Kurt Jacobs, Todd Sedgwick, and Charles Lucas. Pretty special day. And then tomorrow we got 4 more: Fred Harnan, Herbert Johnson, David Burkholder, and David Snyder. I don't know what it is about this week for Rotarians, but pretty cool. And it's a great week because it's certainly Veterans Day week, and that's a special week always. Providing revocation today is Jay Davidson, the chairman of the Healing Place, and he's a Paul Harris Fellow +1.
Please join in prayer. Oh God, hear our prayer today. As we pause for a moment, we pray for all those who are suffering in the wake of the UPS tragedy, that their hearts be healed. We pray with gratitude for all the military, active, reserve, National Guard, retired, here and around the world, that they may be blessed and protected. Grant us love that we may show love to the unlovable as well as those who are lovable. Grant us patience in times of stress, that we may be examples of the peace that comes from knowing you. Grant us tolerance for the intolerant, for through our suffering we may come to learn the depth and breadth of your love for us. Grant us compassion for those who suffer emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually, that we may be a role model of your grace. Grant us goodwill toward everyone, that they may experience true unconditional love. Fill our hearts with gratitude for all the blessings that you have bestowed upon us that we don't deserve because of our actions. And finally, grant us serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Amen. Appreciate it. Jay, now Dorn Crawford, Lieutenant General, U.S. Army retired, former Foreign Affairs Officer in with the U.S. State Department, and he's also a Paul Harris Fellow. He's going to give us our pledge before White House.
Thanks, President. And now our happy duty first to recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And of course, our 4-way test.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you very much. More. Rotarians, if you have a guest today, please come to the mic.
I'm Ken Grossman, Executive Administrator. I'd like to introduce my guest, Dan High School, who is a senior representative with New York Life Insurance. And Dan has already submitted an application to join the club, so please welcome Dan.
President Kidd, my name is Alice Bridges, and I'm delighted to introduce a powerhouse group of guests today that are at our special guest table. Andrew Bates, if you stand. Andrew is with Louisville Metro Government and Procurement, but he has come specifically today to listen to how he is just retired as a Brigadier General in the Lamberton National Guard. I'd like to welcome Ann Lancaster, who is the VP of Innovation donation with the American Printing House for the Blind. John Wiegand, who is the Business Development Manager with Advanced Business Solutions. And Jonathan Tighes, who's a physician in training, educator, motivational speaker, academic and professional development consultant. He has been at the University of Louisville School of Medicine, is just beginning a PhD at Harvard in public health, and has started an amazing organization that's focused on what's called Black Male Equity Network.
President Kim, fellow Rotarians, and distinguished and honored guests, I have one guest with me today, maybe two, but I don't know if President Kim is going to introduce my second guest or if I am. We'll figure that out in a moment. My first guest is Diane Scardino. Diane, stand up. Diane, you can remain standing. They're all going to take pictures of you since you're up front. So Diane and her husband Andy moved here to Louisville, Kentucky. They were recruited by one of our largest employers, Norton Healthcare. This is the woman who's going to be in charge as the Chief Administrator, CEO of Norton's new Children's Hospital. If that's not exciting enough for you, she is the woman that helped run that team running the country's greatest children's network hospital, the Texas Children's Hospital Network. Did I get that right, Diane? Okay, because the last time I introduced her somewhere, I made up some things, and she said, no, that's true. Okay. President Kim, would you like to introduce Dixie Pichelle or me? Okay, you see, Dixie really is my guest. When we hosted a recruitment event recently, I invited Dixie, and then President Kim immediately swooped in because we're having a recruitment competition. So Dixie, okay, Dixie Pichelle is right here. Dixie Pichelle and her husband Logan Pichelle moved to Louisville 5 years ago. I think you hail somewhere from Alabama. I don't.
For a short period of time.
Short period.
Michigan first.
Okay, Michigan first. Oh, the green. I got it. Okay. And I don't know if she is a University of Michigan, Michigan State, War Eagle, or Roll Tide. There you go. Welcome. Okay, how about Go Cards? Okay.
Well, that is certainly almost a go-karts event outfit. Great win over Kentucky, but I think both teams will probably be in the Final Four, except for the blue, right? You're good.
I'm good.
Yeah. Dixie and Logan ran the United Way campaign a few years ago, so a big community advocate. All right, welcome Barbara Collins. She's a member of our Music and Arts Committee and president of Kitchen Planning Design. She's also a Paul Harris Fellow, and she's going to introduce a very special guest we have. Sure, I like your outfit too.
Thank you. Shorty here. Today we have Harvey Turner, who is a graduate of the U of L School of Music. He has been a member and soloist with the Louisville Bach Society and the Calvary Episcopal Church choirs, and a featured singer or cast member in various groups and productions, including Dirty Dinner Playhouse, the Glenn Miller Orchestra. Are y'all impressed? Yeah. The Swing Street Big Band, the Don Krekel Orchestra, and the Colzare Shrine Big Band. His father was a proud veteran who served in the Army Signal Corps in the South Pacific during World War II, and he will be singing today to honor his father and the veterans in our club. Welcome, Harvey Turner.
Thank you so much for having me out here. Barbara, thank you. Known Barbara a long time, even house setter dog and a housey. So, we'd like to start this thing this afternoon with the singing the national anthem. Will you please please stand and sing along with us. And then we've got a couple of other things we're going to do. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? You all too. Thank you. Thank you. So we have just a couple of other things, and thanks to Darlene, thank you. There you are. Thank you. She put all this together, and you did a great job.
We'll see.
So we will, but we would like to, as it is, a couple of days ago it was Veterans Day, and strange enough, my father passed away 31 years ago on the 10th, and so like I said, it was very nice to see the picture of him. I think that was taken in Guam. He was in the South Pacific in World War II. And so, but thank you all who are here who've served for this country. And freedom isn't free, but what you all have done has kept it free. So it's really appreciated. So this is something that you may have heard before. This is what they call the Armed Forces Medley. And so we're going to sing this with a little click track over here. And when you're whoever you were in the service with, we're going to start with the Marines, then we go to the Army, then we go to the Air Force, then we go to the Coast Guard, then we go to the Merchant Marines, and then we go to the Navy. So, if you serve, if you would please stand up once you hear your own special anthem come through this, all right? So, we start with the Marines. Indian Marines, please stand up. Here we go. And you all know the words. From the halls of Montezuma. Here we go. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battle in the air and on the sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. The Army is next. Over hill, over dale, as we hit the dusty trail, and the caissons go rolling along. In and out, good and south, counterparts and right about, and those caissons go rolling along. And it's high, high, in the field artillery. Shout out your numbers loud and strong. For wherever we go, you will always know that those caissons go rolling along. Thank you all so much. Air Force. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder, and a boys give them the gun. Down we climb, spouting our flame from under, off with one hell of a roar. We live in fame or go down in will stop the U.S. Air Force. Thank you all. Thank you. And here's a good one. It's the Coast Guard. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in thee. Through howling gale and shot and shell to win our victory. Semper Paratus is our guide, our pledge, our motto too. We're always ready to or die. Hey, Coast Guard, we fight for you. Russian Marines, I know there's one back here. Gotta sing loud. Hi-ho. It's a long, long way to go. It's a long, long pull with the ashes full. Burning heights, ready to be, fight the treacherous foe. Hi-ho, and my lads, hi-ho, let the sea roll, hi-ho. We can cross any ocean, sail any river, give us the goods and we will deliver. Damn the torpedoes, damn the torpedoes, we're America's merchant marine. Navy! Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to college joys, we sail at break of day. Hey, hey, hey. Through our last night on shore, drink to the foam. Until we meet once more, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. Please, I hope you stand up one more time for a big round of applause. Come on, everybody. God bless you all. Thank you. So we're going to do one more. Again, thank you all. Barbara, thank you for having me. And thank you all. I see some faces that I recognize out there, so it's really nice. We're going to close with it's a Lee Greenwood thing, and please sing along if you would. I need a little help. It's a little high, so the ladies, please sing along. But this is one he wrote back in, it was 1984, and it's played in pretty much anything that celebrates our country. It's called God Bless the USA. A little more. Bring her up just a little bit. If tomorrow all the things were gone that we'd worked for all our lives, had to start again with just our children and our wives, we thank our lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and I can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, the bluegrass of Kentucky, from sea to shining sea, Detroit down to Houston, New York to LA, there's a pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died and gave the right to me. And I'm gladly stand next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Everybody now. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who fought and gave the right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless the USA. Thank you all. Thank you, Harvey. Love that shot. I'll tell you, that is such a great song, one of my favorite. I was in West Virginia after 9/11, and that's another state like Kentucky with a lot of veterans, and that song helped us get through it. Thanks to the committee, Barbara, great job. All right, we have several Rotarians in the spotlight. Congrats to Josh Suter, Nancy Jo Trafton, and corporate member, Indiana University Southeast, on being a finalist for the One Southern Indiana Once Awards in the Business of the Year category. Once Awards is one and ACE, one the top businesses and organizations in the region, and the ACE the top professionals and community leaders. Congrats to Christy Flippins Bartlett and Option to Success, Inc. on the grand opening and ribbon cutting for the new RISE campus in Parkland, a one-stop hub for housing, education, child care, and mental health support, designed to help young women and families get back on their feet. The campus features 41 housing units, a learning lab, on-site daycare, and mental health offices. Susan Zepeda will be exhibiting her fiber art at the Louisville Visual Art Open Studio Weekend this Saturday and Sunday from noon to 5. Stop by and say hi. Congrats to Kenya Wade on graduating from the GLI 2025 Healthcare Enterprises Network Fellows Program, a year-long journey connecting emerging healthcare leaders through exclusive tours, executive sessions, and immersive learning experiences. Congrats to Donnie Atkins on joining Rotarians Holly Turner and Louis Straub on a One West board. That board brings together public, private, and nonprofit partners dedicated to restoring and revitalizing the West End, and it's led by Rotarian President and CEO Devon Smith. Check out Devon Holt's conversation with Hope Zeller on a recent Activating Hope podcast, where they discuss the passion that fuels nonprofit leaders and the pressures that come with the job. You might want to also check out D-Tran's article this week in Business First, how Kentucky can leap ahead with AI. We also have some Rotarians in the wild to spotlight. Check out photos of Dan Maloney, Robert and Karen Chatham, and Kelly Burke from Louisville Zoo trip last month to Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands. Our Iroquois High School Interact Club is hosting a cereal drive today, and the next 2 weeks, Rick Carnan has a box for donations here. Our Rotary Club is hosting a winter clothing and canned food drive. You can bring those items to our meeting next week. And this is your last chance to let Mackenzie White know if you're going to participate Saturday in the Yoga for All Ages meetup at the new Playport space. Our turn to host the annual Joint Rotary Kiwanis Club Thanksgiving celebration right here on Tuesday, November 25th. Reverend Andrew Palmerville, president of Louisville Seminary, will share his thoughts on gratitude. This is also when we kick off the annual Salvation Army Red Kettle campaign, or the Battle of the Bells. Links to register for one or more shifts at the Holiday Manor Kroger on Saturdays in December, the 6th, 13th, and 20th, are on our website, or you can just see George Breakmeyer or Louis Seeger to sign up. Family and friends are welcome.
And our Rotary annual meeting and holiday party will be Wednesday, December 3rd at the Hurst Point Country Club from 5:30 to 9. It will include dinner, dancing, entertainment, a costume contest, and a lot more. The RSVP link is now active, so please register. You can also make your song requests for the DJ playlist. We'll announce the outcome of our election for the 2026-27 officers and directors at the annual meeting. That begins at 6:30. And watch for information about the candidate slate and the voting process next week. Shout out to Barbara for leading that committee. If you can donate a raffle prize for the party, contact Mackenzie White or Jeff Underhill. Tickets are going fast for the Rotary Day at Actors Theater, Saturday, December 6th. It's the matinee showing of Christmas Carol. And if you plan to attend and would like to meet up with fellow Rotarians prior to the show, let Mackenzie know. More details and links and other events and opportunities are on our website and Sparks. Our website's littlerotary.org. And if you haven't already, follow us online on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. All right, we honored a lot of military members today. Are there new members that we have in the club in the past year that want to stand and take a bow?
In the last year.
All right. Warren Crawford did such a good job. We're going to invite him back because we also like to celebrate Rotarian each week. You're our Rotary profile. Because we had so many announcements, you got to keep it a little short.
Thanks, President. Making life brief is not easy, and it's on short notice, but I'll do my best. I'm Gordon Crawford, proud native of Auburn Park.
Get closer to the mic.
Closer to the mic.
That's all. I'm a proud son of Auburn Park and a graduate of Durham High. From there began my adult life at West Point, and then after graduating from there, I went on a series of military command and staff assignments, including a couple of tours in Europe with General Davidson and his successors. So it's certainly a pleasure to see him again. Interspersed in all of this, graduate school and faculty assignments at West Point with the math department, and subsequently headed an analytical cell at the Army Command and General Staff College. Was called from there to Washington to head up the emerging science of policy analysis associated with the arms control effort that was going on at the end of the Cold War, and did a good deal of support work for what became the Conventional Armed Forces Treaty in Europe. And did a brief stint with the group that was designing and analyzing the Desert Storm operation as a closing effort with the Army staff, and then moved on back to the State Department to take a direct hand in a diplomatic effort of implementing and analyzing the treaty that I mentioned. Called back home for family circumstances a few years later, and was surprised to find that the department wanted to organize something that's become known since then as remote work, which wasn't a thing at the time. So I found myself in a pioneer situation of telecommuting, which didn't really take root until many years later, of course, with the pandemic. So I became sort of the poster child of that whole effort, particularly in the department, which was not especially experienced or even enthusiastic. But thanks to the generous hosting of the Air National Guard base here, I took root there in secure facilities and was able to work both directly from there and with periodic travel to keep that effort going. Finally gave that up about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years, and have been involved both during that time and subsequently with a number of civic efforts toward things like waterfront development and transportation planning and airport environmental issues, and did 10 years with the City Council in Auburn Park, and then later 5 years as mayor. So it's been an interesting life, but I'm sure I'll get my bearings eventually. So thanks for hearing that, and I hope I didn't overrun too much.
Thank you. Appreciate your service. Appreciate everyone's service. It's amazing how many in our club are veterans, and that's why it's such a great club. All right, Rick Harnett, please come up. You are the District 67 Assistant Governor, co-chair of our Youth and Education Committee, a Lifetime Service Award recipient, 24 and 25, a Rotarian of the Year, and a Major Domo.
President Ken, let's make sure that is co-Rotarian of the Year. With my wife. It's a huge pleasure to introduce my friend, my fellow Rotarian, Hal Lamberton, to be our speaker today, Adjutant General for the Kentucky National Guard. His service in the military goes back 49 years to becoming an enlistee in the Army in 1976. He then qualified through the ROTC program at the University of Kentucky and got commissioned in 1986 and has been serving in increasing officer ranks for all of that time, including having jumped out of a few perfectly good airplanes as a member of the 82nd Airborne. It was really outstanding. As president, as director of the Kentucky National Guard, he commands nearly 8,400 soldiers and civilians who are members of the Kentucky Army and Air National Guard. He also oversees the statewide Department of Military Affairs, Kentucky Emergency Management, and the Appalachian and Bluegrass Challenge Academies and Bluegrass Stations. He has served overseas with numerous operations, including work in Honduras, in Panama, in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Germany. He's been around the world, guys. He's done it all. Currently, he lives in Louisville with his beautiful wife, Karen, who was not introduced earlier, but needs to be, I think. And he is assisted here by his adjutant, Josh Pickle. Is that Pitchy, John Pitchy, correct, who are also here as our guests, and we're very glad to have them. Fellow Rotarians, and he's a Paul Harris Fellow as well. Please welcome Major General Hal Lamberton.
Relax, grab a seat. So I may wander around in the room a little bit. If you can't hear me, let me know. And just now, as Rick was speaking, I was thinking that, and I've shared it with a couple of other folks already, most of the formations of soldiers or airmen that I go to, I'm the oldest guy in the room, but trying to be a little more tactful, I just say I'm the most experienced guy. With everybody here, I certainly, and Mr. President, appreciate you all lowering the standard this day to engage me as a speaker, but it is an honor to come out here and meet several Rotarian friends again, as we've had contact, but not quite as much over the past 6 years in particular. What I was going to share with you all, and some of you may be aware of it already, but is the National Guard's global reach, and in particular what we call our state partnership program, the SPP program, because it's unique to the Guard, and we are the only organization within the DoD that has such a program relative to all the other military services of whom we just sang their respective songs. So some of you all may recall in February of 22, Russia attacked into Ukraine again. And during that, and just a couple of weeks after that initial attack, that there was a Ukrainian soldier who was striving to engage a Russian tank with a Javelin anti-tank missile. He had a misfire procedure with that rocket. Anyways, not knowing what to do at that point, he just a few weeks prior to that had been training with a National Guard soldier. So he literally pulled out his cell phone, started texting the National Guard soldier that he had been in contact with. Hey, I'm literally in an engagement right now. A Russian tank right in front of me. And shoot, sweetie, I'm filtering my language already. But he got in touch with the guardsman. The guardsman dug up the procedures for handling a misfire under the Javelin, texted it back to the Ukrainian soldier, and then didn't hear anything for a bit. So, you know, it was kind of a OMG type of moment. This didn't work out quite so well. And then shortly thereafter, the guardsman received a video clip of a burning Russian tank. So it's a true story, and some of you may have heard it. It made it in the national media shortly after it came out. But I offer that as an example of, in that case, very much so, one of the specific benefits of the state partnership program are the engagements that your National Guard across the 50 states, the 4 territories to include DC, for our engagements globally. And so here in the picture, if you can see this, we'll step away from mine. Can you all still hear me all right? Yes. In the back of the room?
No.
Take the microphone.
How about now? Okay, perfect. So here's a picture of President Zelensky of Ukraine and my counterparts in the California National Guard, Dave Baldwin, who was the Adjutant General for the California National Guard at the time. Dave literally told me that post-2014, and some of you may recall, that's when the Russians initially attacked into the Ukraine, and that's when they took over the Crimea Peninsula, laid back for a while. But for the subsequent engagements between the California National Guard and the Ukrainian military, they ramped it up, obviously, very significantly. But one of the things, having spoken with a lieutenant colonel in the Ukrainian military, his statement, one of the biggest mistakes the Russians made post-2014 is that they gave them, the Ukrainians, time to get ready. And so much greater activity between the California National Guard and the Ukrainian military in particular. Some of you, and I'll get into it in a little bit in the presentation, but the SPP program, the State Partnership Program, it's not a requirement, but it's pretty much seen as sort of a preliminary step to membership in NATO these days. Next slide, please. But before I get into that, some of you have probably heard this, and it's something that always weighs in the back of my mind. It was stated by Winston Churchill during his days of the Second World War, and it's on there, you can read it, but I'm going to state it as well. But the only thing worse than going to war with your allies is going to war without your allies. Yeah, it was problematic, and some of you probably have heard or read about the friction between Patton and Montgomery. But the flip side of not having allies in a combative environment is catastrophic in some scenarios. So here's a sense, and some of you are probably as or more aware of this than I, but in our world today, we've got 195 countries. Of those 195 countries, the National Guard across the 54 states and territories has a military through the State Partnership Program relationship with 115 of those countries. And it is still growing. And there is no other entity anywhere within the DoD that has that type of global relationship throughout every continent across the world. So here's a picture, and it'll just tell you some of the things that I'm going to address. What is the SPP program? I'm going to describe a little bit about the combat geographic commands. But the picture I want to draw your attention to in particular, the gentleman to the far left in this picture is Admiral Vela. He is the Chief of Defense for the Ecuadorian military. That's one of the countries that the Kentucky National Guard has a partnership with, and due to some political dynamics I'll get into in a moment, but that partnership only within the very recent years became more energized. Admiral Vela was the first CHOD, Chief of Defense, that we've ever had in this country, the first CHOD that we've ever had in Kentucky, and this particular photo was just about a year ago when he came here. The state partnership program in particular, and there are folks in the room who are far smarter than I, because I'm not smart enough to get out of the way of the projector. But it began with the downfall, or in the aftermath of the downfall of the Soviet Union. And so as the former Warsaw Pact countries split up, a conscious decision was to go ahead and re-engage with a lot of those countries and not quite bring them into NATO. NATO wasn't quite simply comfortable with that type of a mindset, but they didn't want any sort of loose or rogue countries going off and becoming an ongoing threat. So the fall of the Soviet Union in '91, the first state-partnered countries came about in '93. As a matter of fact, Ukraine and California, that was one of the first relationships. But in doing so, that was the initiation of the SPP program. Here, this map sheet.
We're filming, so if you can state.
I might be a GO, but I have lots of folks who tell me what to do all the time, and it starts at home. Thanks, Colleen. So this map sheet in particular, it shows or depicts the NATO-aligned countries. It depicts the EU or European Union-aligned countries. It shows the non-NATO EU-aligned countries, the non-EU NATO-partnered countries. And what I'm getting at is look at it. Virtually all the countries there in yellow has a state partner. The state partners are identified up there on the map as well. But in particular, I really want to draw your attention, and some of you are probably tracking this bit of information better than others. Within just the past 2 years, both Finland and Sweden became state-partnered countries. Subsequent to their state partnership, they became members of NATO. And I'm not going to stop there. Some of you are probably tracking this as well. Switzerland, neutral through World War I, post-World War I, neutral through World War II, post-World War II, up through the Cold War, always seen as a neutral country. They just, within the past few months, became a partnership country through the SPP program. I have no idea at all what their aspirations are for NATO, but again, a country that had been neutral to global conflicts for over a century is now partnered with, actually I think it's Colorado, out of the National Guard. So the state partnership program, the advantage to it, and again, I defer to the knowledge of some of the folks here in the room, you're probably more aware than I. The real advantage is to our geographic combatant commands. If you're not familiar with that, basically think of it around the world. The entire world has been sliced up into different sections that parts of the DoD deals with. You've got the AFRICOM or African Command, you've got EUCOM or the European Command, you've got CENTCOM or the Central Command. We've got a total of 6 of them, but for my dealings with 3- and 4-star GOs, for my dealings with various ambassadors, not just U.S. ambassadors, but foreign ambassadors, the one thing that virtually all of them almost always brings up initially is the Guard State Partnership Program, because it's that program that enables them to have the relationships with the other countries, to have the relationships with the military of the other countries. And I know I'm being repetitive, there is no other entity within DoD to include our FAO program that has that type of a global reach. Next, please. So the focus in particular, and I think this is really unique because it's an example of what the state National Guard brings to it. So yeah, well, we do the military engagements. So we go out there and do training with the partnered nations that we work with. And it's everything that you would imagine taking place down in Fort Knox or Fort Campbell or other military installations. But beyond that, or the Kentucky National Guard, we're basically a state organization. So I'm representative of the state government here in the Commonwealth. Each of my fellow tags, adjutant generals, are representative of their respective states. So it becomes the proverbial whole of government type of response. So across the 54 states and territories, every state National Guard is able to make the engagement with the country that they're aligned with to bring other entities of state government. And this is everything from the Department of Education, Department of Transportation, the State Homeland Security Office, the State Department of Justice, the State IT Office, if you will, inclusive of communications, IT, and the cyber world. It's much easier for me to bring those offices into engagements that we've got with our aligned countries than it is done at the federal level. So the Department of State is a huge proponent for the SPP program because they're limited in the number of folks, the number of resources, and I'm really not striving to get political, but as USAID has gone away, it even offers more opportunities for the SPP program. As I mentioned, by virtue of that, the humanitarian efforts that go into it, so our engagements in Djibouti and Ecuador, along with the Galapagos Islands, are part of our partnered footprint. But our engagement with them is well beyond just those in uniform. Specifically between those two countries, we've had medical engagements, we've had engagements involving the State Office of Health and Family Services. So it's much more than just a military type of engagement. And as I mentioned a little bit ago, when these partnerships are initially stood up, it's an advantage to the combatant commander over in theater. Some of you may be aware, especially who've worn the uniform previously, when the Army's 5th Corps headquarters was stood up just about 5-6 years ago back at Fort Knox, and their first commander, a 3-star general, he literally shared with me that as he was standing up the command, as he was engaging across the European theater, he was reliant on the relationships via the state partnership program to open the doors to the governments, to the militaries of pretty much every Western European country. So that's the military advantage. Again, the State Department knows well that the State Department itself doesn't have to resource any part of this, so they're able to tap into the formation and the relationships that we can do through the state partnership program, if that makes sense to folks. And the real big advantage, and I think, I say it up there onto the slide, over a third, and I think that's kind of a underwhelming number for the level of engagements, but over a third of all of our international DoD relationships are through this program. And we only cost DoD less than 1% of the total budget. So, do the numbers on that and tell me if there isn't a value added to that piece as well. I mentioned a little bit ago, we've got 2 partnerships. The initial was with Ecuador, next was Djibouti. We've had a relationship with Djibouti for about 10 years at this junction. As a matter of fact, this past summer, we held a recognition involving senior leadership from the Djiboutian military coming here, membership out of the Djiboutian embassy coming here, folks from our embassy coming here to recognize this effort. But the neat thing with Djibouti, and next slide please, if you're not familiar with it, Djibouti is along the Horn of Africa region, along the eastern African coast. It's just a tiny, small, little, poor country. It's sandwiched between Somalia and Ethiopia and Eritrea. But it sits astride the water passageway, which from the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden out to the Indian Ocean, and some of you are probably more familiar than I, but a significant passageway for much of the oil that's coming out of the Middle East. So it very much has a strategic type of position, and not just for the U.S. and not just for our economic efforts, but globally. And some of you are probably also aware just across the waterway from Djibouti is Yemen. And how many of you have heard of the Houthis and their operations in South Yemen? And it's in particular from South Yemen that they launch a lot of their missile and rocket attacks to the water traffic passing through there. So very disruptive to the global economic effort. Tiny little country, Djibouti. Poor little country, Djibouti. The real advantage to Djibouti is that it has, its coastline enables it to have a deep water port. So you can bring in a lot of huge international shipping assets to it. A few years ago, and some of you are probably tracking this as well, the PRC, the People's Republic of China, they built a harbor in Djibouti. You know, again, Djibouti, just poor little country, and I thought of it myself, if I don't have my own resources, yeah, I'll take it from wherever I can get it. So they took it from China in this case. The Chinese Navy still mans this harbor. They don't do it in uniform any longer, but they still man it. And so I use that as an example. It's not just the Chinese, it's not just the US, but globally, militaries around the world recognize the strategic implications of having a presence in Djibouti. Just a couple of years ago, I had been invited to the Djiboutian Independence Day, and I still get a kick out of this because you literally had the militaries from all of the continents that we just described present there. Literally sitting right in front of me was a captain out of the Chinese Navy. He and I never spoke. Don't know the language. But literally to my left, I also had a general from the Russian army. And, you know, I sort of greeted him, and he just kind of grunted back at me. So I presume he doesn't speak English, and I don't speak Russian. But, so here it is. Your National Guard, the little old Kentucky National Guard, has a foothold in the strategic implications for our DoD's engagements globally, and just by virtue of our presence. And we do have folks who are permanently, Kentucky Guardsmen, who are permanently in Djibouti. The other country that we've got, Ecuador, but we mentioned the Galapagos Islands a little bit ago, which are owned by Ecuador. Ecuador along the western coast of South America. And it's a neat place to visit. The neat thing about Ecuador in particular, while we've had this relationship for about 30 years at this junction, the initial leadership under Ecuador and President Correa, he was not a westward leaning type of president, if that makes sense to any of you. So in other words, he was much more aligned with Hugo Chavez, also another non-westward Western government leaning type of person. But then in 21, it started with President Lazo, and today President Noboa, who's the leadership down in Ecuador. They very much want to engage with Western countries. And so specifically, they've opened up the countries more so. The mindset of the leadership, the presidential leadership in Ecuador these days, is they want to further engage. So go back with me just a moment. When it was under President Correa, we had that relationship, and we still sent soldiers and airmen down to Ecuador, but they could not go in uniform. They had to maintain a very low profile. They could still conduct the engagements in Ecuador, but the government administration did not want to give any sense of a U.S. president. As a matter of fact, for all of our active duty forces who previously had been in Ecuador, that they all got kicked out of the country. Move forward, President Lazo, President Noboa, and some of you may have heard it as well, that under President Noboa right now, he's trying to encourage the U.S. military and the U.S. State Department to actually build a U.S. post or military installation in Ecuador these days. The greatest concerns for the military in Ecuador is not so much some of their neighboring states. Some of you might be aware a few years ago, but Ecuador was at war with Peru. That is no longer the case. The friction has long since subsided. But their issues deal with narco-terrorism. Go figure with South America. But narco-terrorism and illegal fishing, and believe it or not, cyber-related issues. But the narco-terrorism, Ecuador is not a country that grows or produces or manufactures the drugs, but they're sort of a passageway country. A lot of that gets trafficked and literally driven through the country itself. But in Ecuador, the police force and military force are kind of synonymous with one another, so it's jointly their responsibility to fight back against that. So that's their greatest on-ground threat. The illegal fishing, and I still kind of get a kick out of this, it's not by neighboring countries there, it's by Chinese fishing boats who travel all the way over from mainland China or the international waterways in the vicinity of China to tap into other fishing reserves. And beating back that effort is a huge concern for Ecuador. And some of you, if you visited the country, let alone gone out to the Galapagos, the Ecuadorian military, the Ecuadorian Navy is also tiny. So they have very few in the way of reserves that's able to combat against it. So, let's see, where am I with the slides now? Okay. I'm just talking, I'm just rambling on my own, so bear with me a moment. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so as I wrap up the state partnership program, and speaking of it, as I mentioned a little bit ago, we currently have 115 partnered countries around the world. And every year, a few more partnered countries are added to that group. You know, as I mentioned relative to NATO, that it's not a requirement, but it very much is seen as a stepping stone to NATO membership. And some of you are very much as aware of this as I. The biggest boon to NATO recently, and don't take this the wrong way, but has been Russia and Putin's engagement against Ukraine, because that's reinforced NATO. It's caused a direct expansion of NATO. It's caused the expansion of resources coming into NATO. And coupled right with that is a state partnership program. The one thing I want to wrap up and share with you all, I'm going a little bit off track. Yeah, I tend to do that a lot. But I wanted to introduce you all to 4 of our soldiers. And so to the 2 gentlemen on the left and to the right of this slide, Sergeant Miller and Sergeant Keller, that they came out of our air wing, which is adjacent to Standiford Field, that they work in a unit there referred to as an STS, or Special Tactics Squadron. These are the folks who work as part of SOCOM, or the Military Special Operations Command. They work with Army Rangers, they work with Navy SEALs, they work with Green Berets. They're that type of service members. Anyways, back in Afghanistan, both of these gentlemen, because of some engagements that they were involved with, they ended up receiving the Air Force Cross. And some of you know it, for those of you who don't, that the Air Force Cross is second only to the Medal of Honor for military valor awards earned in a combative environment. Over the past 2+ decades, the Air Force, the total Air Force, the Air National Guard, the Active Duty Air Force, the Air Force Reserve, has only awarded 9 folks with the Air Force Cross. 2 of them out of the National Guard right here in our state, in our air wing. The other 2 folks up here in the center of that photo is depicted in the photo as Master Sergeant 9, he's now Sergeant Major 9, and Sergeant Hester. That they were part of providing security to a convoy in Iraq. They came under attack by a set of insurgents intent on not just killing them, but capturing them to hold them for barter material, if you will. And anyways, upon the attack, which blocked the convoy, Sergeant Hester, Sergeant 9, along with several others, that they had to dismount their vehicles, which they did, and they ended up fighting through that attack with small arms fires and hand grenades, and effectively nobody was captured. Really good, nobody was killed in that particular attack, but Sergeant Major 9 also received the Army's Distinguished Service Cross. Again, second only to the Medal of Honor as a valorous award. Sergeant Hester received the Silver Star, which is third in the priorities of valorous awards. Neat thing there with her, into the history of the Army here into the States, in our country, to date, only 9 women have received the Silver Star. Sergeant Hester is not just one of those 9, but she's the only one of those 9 who received a Silver Star for being in direct contact where she was returning fire to the enemy. The other women, as significant as their efforts were, they were medics responding to the need of other service members under fire, or medical officers who were trying to and lending aid to service members in a intense environment. But these 4 folks, I share with you that that's the quality of the folks that we got in the Kentucky National Guard. My wife hears it, the other folks who served with me in uniform, but I say I'm biased to the Kentucky National Guard, but it's really to the quality of the folks that we got up there, to the quality of some of the folks that we got here in the room. But this is your National Guard. That these credible folks, these men and women, that's the quality of our organization. That the National Guard, when most folks think of it, unless they've been a member of the military or have been into the Guard in particular, thinks of the Guard as stacking sandbags in a flood. And yeah, we still do that, but we do a little bit more these days as well. So that said, Ken, that's all I've got, and subject to your timeline and questions.
If you have questions, please come on up.
I'm Larry Sloan. I'm retired from being a manufacturer's representative for 50 years. I appreciate your service. I remember you when you were in our club. I am curious about your feelings or thoughts, if you want to express them, on women in the service. There's been a lot of it publicized lately. We have several women who are retired in this club from the Air Force and other services. And that woman obviously was very brave, but I'm sure they're all brave. what is the problem that we see now with having women in the service, especially in higher ranks?
Sure. Thanks, Larry, and I appreciate seeing you again as well. Hal Lamberton's opinion, I have no bloody problem with that at all. They're women who are stronger, smarter, especially these days, faster than I am. But you know, I think back, Larry, and so you may be tracking, and I know some of the gentlemen here in the room. I think it was about 13 years ago, and Admiral Mullen was the chair for the Joint Chiefs, and he opened up all military jobs to women. But in particular, what I'm recalling, that's when women were first sent to the Army's Ranger School. And to date, and I know that this is off, but I want to say that they're in excess of 100 plus women graduates of the Army's Ranger School. And for those of you who are familiar with it, Ranger School sucks. The best part of Ranger School was the day I graduated and was able to leave. But for women who are just as tough mentally and physically to endure that sort of thing, you know, to my thinking, Larry, and for some of the environments that I and some of my fellow service members have been in, I just want to know that I can rely on the person. And so, sweetie, I'm filtering my language again. I really don't care what sex, whether city boy, country boy, religious preference, racial, that doesn't mean anything to me. But can I rely on you, and especially in an intense environment, and then you're my buddy forevermore. And I think there are a lot of women who are able to keep that.
Don't want to overdo my presence on the agenda, but John had a little more delicate but related topic to ask about, and that's civil military relations. The SBP has obviously had a big influence on that overseas, but I'm wondering about the domestic situation, and specifically given the current political climate.
Sure.
Whether you have any, whether you are having any dialogues or issuing any guidance on the subject of domestic roles, if they should come, and how the Guard would be able to operate in that environment and maintain their legal obligations.
Yep. So, sir, you know, being sincere with it, yes, there have been a few conversations, and locally with our state government, and nationally with higher levels of authority, and so everybody is tracking, you know, that we still have the National Guard in D.C. We have National Guard in Chicago. We've had National Guard in L.A. There's still talk of sending or operating the National Guard in Portland. The National Guard is in Memphis. And, you know, so we strive, as many of you know, in the military, to say that we're apolitical, but sometimes it's not black and white, it's a lot more gray. And so still, to answer your question, one thing I would really caution everybody to be on the lookout for in the Guard world, and I defer to everybody, especially if your experience with the military was active duty, but in the Guard, there are numerous authorities that a Guardsman can be launched or sent to an operational or a domestic operational environment. And basically, it comes under the U.S. Code Title 10 or U.S. Code Title 32. And so that, you know, I'm not going to give you a civics lesson, but I'm pulling this out to everybody's awareness that the real difference there is that the Guard in a Title 10 status, but we're the same thing as all of our active duty brothers and sisters across all the different military services. The Guard in a Title 32 status, it's different. And in particular, for those of you who are familiar with posse comitatus, and the duty status that the Guard is launched in, if it's a status that is aligned with posse comitatus, The guards, just like our active duty brothers and sisters, cannot serve in a law enforcement capacity. In a Title 32 status, they can serve in a law enforcement capacity. So for the guardsmen, as an example, who went to DC, they're in a Title 32 capacity, and the real distinction there is that they went there with gubernatorial approval. The guardsmen who are activated under a Title 10 status, that they certainly didn't have gubernatorial approval. It may not have been a question, but they cannot serve as law enforcement officers. So and I know that there have been a little bit of issues, and some of y'all may have seen it in court settings. The folks who went out to LA were in a Title 10 status. And so they, by law, should not have served in any sort of law enforcement capacity. I'm not going to go into the sucking black hole that situation is still being resolved with, but that's the thing really to be aware wherever and however the guard gets launched, what's the duty status associated with it. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Al, for sharing your prayer with us. This is a commemorative point of the Rotary four-way test to remind you of your time here. Thank you very much for your service. Appreciate it. All right, next week, Barbara will be leading you. I have a Kentucky Broadcasters Association board meeting, and Hewlin's going to be our Rotarian profile, and who's going to be our guest?
Okay, all right, thank you, President Ken. As he goes AWOL next week, I couldn't resist all the way to Bowling Green. I'm happy to lead the meeting. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please come next week. Because as I make that bridge, as I try to introduce the next speaker from the current speaker, from military to medicine to mixology. Stay with me, all right? Next week, you can see it. Here she is. It's Dr. Danielle Mann, and she was the founder and CEO of the Danielle's River Green Cocktails, and she's going to give a speech about a different route. You cannot make this up. It says it right here, Lewis. It says from GYN, as in gynecological, yes. Do you know her? Oh, okay, we have a big smile up here at the front table. Okay, so Dr. Mann is going to talk to us about how do you take a different route from GYN to GIN. Yes, about her unexpected leap from medicine to mixology. So as I like to say, come next week, it's bottoms up, any way you look at it.
Thank you, Barbara. We have a lot of guests today. Craig Sherman is in the What is Rotary table right there if you want to go talk to him for a few minutes about our club. And I hope you have a great weekend, a great week ahead. We are adjourned.